I never thought I'd end up in a legal battle over ice melt, but here I am, sitting in a courtroom staring down the woman who might have just ruined her entire life over 20 pounds of rock salt. My name is James Fitzgerald, and I've lived in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Buffalo, New York for 3 years. When I bought my modest 2-story colonial on Elmwood Drive, I knew there'd be an HOA, but the fees seemed reasonable, and the neighborhood looked well maintained. What I didn't know was that the HOA president, a woman named Patricia Whitmore, would become my absolute worst nightmare during the historic blizzard of January 2026. Buffalo gets snow. Everyone knows that. We're used to it, prepared for it, and honestly, most of us don't even blink when the forecast calls for a foot or 2. But this storm was different. The meteorologists started warning us a full week in advance that this would be a monster, potentially dropping 3 to 4 feet of snow with winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. They were calling it a once-in-a-generation blizzard, the kind that would shut down the entire city for days. I started preparing on Monday, January 20th. The storm was supposed to hit Thursday night and last through Saturday. I made a list: extra food, batteries, flashlights, fuel for my generator, and most importantly, ice melt. My driveway has a slight slope, and without proper treatment, it becomes an ice rink that sent me sprawling more than once. I also needed to make sure the area around my pipes stayed clear and treated, especially the exterior spigots and the section where my main water line entered the house. Tuesday afternoon, I hit up 3 different hardware stores. The panic buying had already started and shelves were getting bare. I managed to score 4 50-pound bags of calcium chloride ice melt at the last store, paying a premium for it, but I figured it was worth it. I also grabbed 2 20-pound bags of rock salt. That should be plenty to get me through the storm and the aftermath. I stored everything in my garage, right near the door for easy access. The bags were heavy and expensive, but they gave me peace of mind. I had a generator with fuel, enough food for 2 weeks, and now I had my ice melt situation handled. I felt prepared. Wednesday evening, I was walking my dog, a golden retriever named Copper, when Patricia pulled up beside me in her pristine white Lexus SUV. She rolled down her window, her blonde highlighted hair perfectly styled despite the bitter cold. "James," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to tell me something I was doing wrong. "I noticed you haven't trimmed your hedge along the property line. The HOA bylaws clearly state that all landscaping must be maintained year-round." I stared at her. "Patricia, there's literally 3 feet of snow coming in less than 24 hours. Nobody can even see the hedge right now under the snow that's already there." "That's not the point. The rules exist for a reason. I'll need you to address it once the storm passes, or I'll have to issue a citation." A citation. She loved that word. Patricia had been HOA president for 7 years, and in the 3 years I'd lived here, I'd watched her issue citations for grass being a 1/4 inch too long, for Christmas decorations staying up past January 5th, and once, memorably, for someone's garbage can being visible from the street for 20 minutes longer than the allowed time after pickup. "Sure, Patricia. Once we dig out from the blizzard, trimming my hedge will be my top priority," I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. She gave me a tight smile. "I appreciate your cooperation. Oh, and make sure you clear your sidewalk within 12 hours of the snow stopping. That's village ordinance as well as HOA policy." She drove off before I could respond. Copper looked up at me and wagged his tail, blissfully unaware of HOA politics. Thursday morning, I did a final check of everything. Generator was ready to go. Food was stocked. Ice melt was in the garage. I brought in extra firewood and made sure my phone and all my backup batteries were fully charged. The snow started falling around 2 in the afternoon, light at first, but within an hour it was coming down heavy. The wind picked up as evening approached, and by dinner time, it was a full whiteout outside my windows. I made myself a hot meal, knowing the power would probably go out at some point, and settled in to wait out the storm. Copper curled up by the fireplace, and I watched the news coverage showing the interstate completely shut down and the city basically at a standstill. Around 9 p.m., I heard something over the howling wind. It sounded like my garage door opening. That didn't make sense. The door was closed and locked, and nobody should be trying to get in there during a blizzard. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and headed through the kitchen to the door that connected to the garage. When I opened it and flipped on the light, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Patricia Whitmore was in my garage, loading my bags of ice melt into a large plastic storage bin. She'd already taken 3 of the bags. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. She jumped, nearly dropping the bag she was holding. Her face went red, but instead of looking embarrassed or guilty, she looked angry. "I'm confiscating these," she said, her voice sharp. "You have an excessive amount of ice melt stored here, which violates the HOA's resource hoarding policy during emergency situations." Resource hoarding policy. I've never heard of any such thing, and even if it existed, you can't just break into my garage and steal my property. I didn't break in. I have access codes to all properties for emergency HOA inspections. And this isn't stealing, it's redistribution. Several residents didn't prepare adequately for the storm, and as HOA president, it's my responsibility to ensure everyone has what they need. I was so stunned I almost couldn't speak. "You're insane. Put those back right now." "I will not. I'm taking these bags to distribute among those who need them. You still have plenty here." She gestured to the remaining bags. "Patricia, you're literally committing theft. You can't just make up fake HOA policies and steal people's property." "It's not theft, it's emergency management. You can file a complaint with the HOA board if you disagree with my decision, but right now, I have 3 families who need ice melt and you have a surplus." She started dragging the bin toward the garage door. I stepped in front of her. "You're not taking those. I paid for them, I need them, and you have no legal right to them. Move, James, or I'll cite you for interfering with HOA emergency operations." "Cite me. You're stealing from me and threatening me with citations." We stood there in a standoff for a moment. The wind howled outside, rattling the garage door. Patricia's face was set in that stubborn expression I'd seen her use at HOA meetings when someone dared to question her decisions. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. She actually laughed. "Good luck with that. In case you haven't noticed, we're in the middle of a historic blizzard. The police have actual emergencies to deal with. They're not going to come out here over some ice melt." She had a point, and she knew it. I tried anyway, but the 911 operator told me exactly what Patricia had predicted. Unless someone was in immediate danger, police weren't responding to calls. The entire city was in a state of emergency, and they were triaging calls. Property theft during a blizzard wasn't making the list. "I'm sorry, sir," the operator said. "You'll need to file a report online or come to the station once the storm passes." Patricia gave me a triumphant look. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have deliveries to make. If you take those bags, Patricia, I will press charges the moment this storm is over. I will take you to court. I will make sure everyone in this neighborhood knows you're a thief." "Do what you need to do," she said, pushing past me. She hit the garage door opener and the door rumbled up, letting in a blast of snow and wind. She dragged the bin out into the storm, leaving snowy footprints across my garage floor. The door closed behind her, and she was gone. I stood there, absolutely furious and feeling completely helpless. She'd just stolen from me in my own garage, and there was nothing I could immediately do about it. I checked what she'd left me. 2 of the 50-pound bags and both 20-pound bags. She'd taken 2 50-pound bags and 1 50-pound bag, basically half of my supply. I went back inside, dripping melted snow all over the floor. This was unbelievable. I knew Patricia was controlling and power-hungry, but I never thought she'd actually commit a crime. And she'd been so brazen about it, so confident that she had the right to do whatever she wanted. I couldn't sleep that night. The storm raged outside, the power went out around midnight, and I kept thinking about those bags of ice melt. I'd need them. My driveway would be buried under feet of snow and ice, and I had to keep the areas around my pipes clear. This wasn't about being petty or hoarding resources. This was about practical necessity. Friday morning, I woke up to a world buried in white. The snow was still falling, though not as heavily as the night before. I could barely see my neighbor's house through the swirling snow. The power was still out, so I got my generator running and made coffee. Basic necessities first. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my neighbor to the east, Robert Chen. Robert was a quiet guy, a software engineer who worked from home. We weren't close friends, but we'd helped each other out with snow removal and yard work over the years. "James, did Patricia Whitmore come to your house last night?" he asked. "Yeah, she broke into my garage and stole half my ice melt, claimed it was some kind of HOA emergency policy. She came here too. I wouldn't let her in. She said she was confiscating excess supplies, and I told her if she didn't leave my property I'd call the police. She left, but she was furious. So she actually tried this with multiple people, apparently. I've been texting with a few other people on the street. She hit up at least 5 houses that we know of. Most people weren't home or didn't answer their doors. You and I are the only ones she actually confronted. Robert, she literally broke into my garage. She said she has access codes to all properties. There was a pause. That's absolutely illegal. HOA presidents don't get blanket access to people's homes. That's not a thing. I tried to call the police, but they're not responding to property theft calls during the storm. Yeah, I figured. Listen, once this storm passes, we need to take action. This is way over the line, even for Patricia. We talked for a few more minutes, sharing information about what Patricia had taken from me and what she'd tried to take from others. By the time we hung up, I was even angrier than before. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a moment of panic. This was a planned operation. She'd gone house to house, using the storm as cover to steal from residents. The storm continued through Friday night and finally started to taper off Saturday morning. By Saturday afternoon, the snow had stopped, and we were left with approximately 42 inches of snow, according to the news. The entire city was shut down. The interstate was closed, most streets were impassable, and the mayor had declared a state of emergency. I bundled up and went outside to assess the situation. My driveway was completely buried. The snow had drifted in places, creating banks that were 5 and 6 feet high. This was going to take days to dig out, even with my snow blower. I started the snow blower and began the slow process of clearing my driveway. It was exhausting work. The snow was heavy and wet in places, light and drifting in others. I had to stop every 30 minutes to rest. While I was taking a break, I saw Patricia across the street, standing in her own driveway, talking on her phone. She looked agitated. I ignored her and went back to work. By the time the sun started to set, I'd cleared about half my driveway and the area around my foundation where the pipes entered the house. I put down ice melt on the cleared sections, grateful that I still had some left despite Patricia's theft. That evening I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Is this James Fitzgerald?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded upset. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Donna from 3 houses down. Patricia Whitmore brought me a bag of ice melt last night, said it was from the HOA emergency supply. But Robert Chen just told me she actually stole it from you." I felt my jaw clench. "Yeah, she broke into my garage and took half my supply." "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." She told me the HOA had purchased emergency supplies for residents who needed them. I would never have accepted it if I'd known it was stolen. "Do you want me to bring it back?" "Keep it," I said. "It's not your fault. Patricia lied to you, but I want you to know what actually happened." "I feel terrible. She told me you had too much and were violating some policy. I should have questioned it, but honestly, with the storm and everything, I just believed her." "Don't worry about it. But if you're willing, I might need you to provide a statement about what Patricia told you." "I'm planning to press charges once the city is operational again." "Absolutely. What she did is wrong. I'll tell anyone who asks exactly what she told me." Over the next few hours, I got 2 more similar calls. Both from people Patricia had delivered stolen ice melt to, both feeling guilty and angry once they learned the truth. Patricia had spun quite a story, making herself sound like a hero managing emergency resources, when in reality she was just a thief who'd used the storm as cover. Sunday morning I was up early, continuing to dig out. The temperature had dropped overnight and everything was freezing solid. I was glad I had my remaining ice melt. Without it, my driveway would be a death trap. Around 10 a.m., I heard screaming from across the street. I looked up to see Patricia standing in her front yard, still in her bathrobe, yelling into her phone. "I don't care what the city says, I need a plumber now. My pipes have frozen and burst. There's water everywhere." I felt a moment of something between satisfaction and concern. Frozen pipes were no joke. They could cause thousands of dollars in damage. But given that she'd stolen my ice melt while apparently not taking care of her own property, it was hard to feel too sympathetic. She saw me watching and actually started walking across the street toward me, slipping and sliding in the snow in her house slippers. "James, I need to borrow some ice melt. I have a pipe emergency." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're joking." "This isn't a joke. My pipes froze last night and burst this morning. I have water pouring into my basement. I need to clear the area around my foundation and try to prevent more pipes from freezing." "Patricia, you stole my ice melt 2 days ago. You broke into my garage and took half my supply. And now you want to borrow more." That was different. That was HOA business. It was theft. It was a crime. And now you're dealing with the consequences of your own poor planning. Her face went red. "How dare you? I was helping the community. I was making sure resources were distributed fairly." "You were stealing. And apparently, while you were so busy stealing my property and redistributing it, you didn't bother to take care of your own house. That's not my problem. James, please, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you double what the ice melt cost. I just need help right now." "No. You made your choice when you broke into my garage. Deal with the consequences." Tears started running down her face. Whether they were from frustration, anger, or genuine distress, I couldn't tell and didn't particularly care. "You're going to stand there and let my house flood." "What kind of neighbor are you? The kind who doesn't help thieves. Now get off my property before I call the police." "Oh wait, I already tried that when you stole from me and they wouldn't come. But the storm's over now, so maybe they'll actually respond." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She turned and stumbled back across the street, crying openly now. I watched her go, feeling a mix of anger and grim satisfaction. I went back to clearing snow. Around noon, a plumbing truck managed to make it down our street. They stopped at Patricia's house, and I saw the plumber go inside. He came out 20 minutes later, shaking his head. The conversation that followed was clearly not good news for Patricia. She was gesturing wildly, and even from across the street, I could hear her raised voice. The plumber left, and Patricia sat down on her front steps, crying into her hands despite the freezing temperature. My phone rang. It was Robert. "Are you seeing this with Patricia?" he asked. "Yeah, her pipes burst. She came over here begging for ice melt. You didn't give her any, did you?" "Hell no. She made her bed, she can lie in it." "Good. I know it sounds harsh, but she literally stole from you. She doesn't get to come crying for help when she faces consequences. Speaking of which, the police non-emergency line is working again. I called and filed a report about her attempted theft from my property. You should do the same about the actual theft." "I'm planning to. I'm also going to contact a lawyer. I want to press charges and sue for damages." "I'll back you up." "I'm also going to call for an emergency HOA meeting to have her removed as president. What she did is illegal and completely violated her position. Let me know what I need to do to support that." Monday morning, the city was slowly coming back to life. Main roads were being plowed, though side streets like ours were still in rough shape. I'd finished clearing my driveway and had helped my elderly neighbor to the west, Margaret, clear hers. Margaret was a sweet, 75-year-old widow who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, long before the HOA existed. I made it to the police station and filed a formal report about the theft. The officer taking my statement looked tired. He'd probably been working non-stop since the storm started. "So the HOA president broke into your garage and stole ice melt," he repeated, making sure he had the facts straight. "Yes." She claimed she had access codes to all properties for emergency inspections, which I've since learned is completely false and not authorized anywhere in our HOA documents. She broke into my garage and took approximately 150 pounds of ice melt worth about $75. "And you have evidence of this?" "I have her own admission. She told me directly what she was doing and why. I also have statements from 3 residents who she delivered the stolen ice melt to, claiming it was from HOA emergency supplies. They're all willing to testify that she lied about where the supplies came from." The officer nodded, typing everything into his computer. Given the value and the breaking and entering component, this could be charged as burglary in the 3rd degree, which is a felony. At minimum, it's petit larceny and criminal trespass. I want to press full charges. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of panic. She planned this. She went to multiple homes and tried to steal from multiple people. She used her position as HOA president to commit crimes. I understand. We'll investigate and forward this to the district attorney's office. Given everything else going on, it might take a few days, but we will follow up. I left the station feeling like I'd taken the first real step toward justice. Patricia had been so confident that she'd get away with it, so sure that her position as HOA president gave her special rights. She was about to learn otherwise. That afternoon, I received an email from Robert. He'd formally called for an emergency HOA board meeting to address Patricia's actions. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening at the community center, assuming the roads were clear enough for people to safely attend. I spent Tuesday consulting with a lawyer, Barbara Sullivan, who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. Her office was in downtown Buffalo, and the roads were just clear enough for me to make the drive. "This is one of the more blatant cases I've seen," Barbara said after I'd explained everything. She was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. HOA presidents have authority over common areas and certain aspects of property maintenance as outlined in the governing documents, but they absolutely do not have the right to enter private property without permission, and they certainly don't have the right to take personal property. She claimed there was a resource hoarding policy for emergencies. Complete fiction. I've reviewed your HOA's bylaws and covenants. No such policy exists. Even if it did, it wouldn't supersede basic property rights and criminal law. You don't get to steal just because you're HOA president. So what are my options? You have several. First, the criminal charges you filed. Those will proceed through the district attorney's office. Second, you can file a civil suit against her personally for theft, trespass, and conversion of property. Third, you can file a complaint with the HOA board to have her removed from her position. Fourth, depending on how much damage she caused and whether there are other victims, you might be looking at a class action if other homeowners want to join. I want to pursue all of those options. I'll draft the civil complaint. As for the HOA board, make sure you attend that meeting and bring any evidence you have. Emails, photos of the stolen property, statements from the people she delivered it to, everything. What about her burst pipes? She came begging for ice melt after hers froze. Barbara actually smiled. That's called poetic justice, though I wouldn't mention it in court. It does demonstrate that she was so focused on stealing from others that she neglected her own property, which undermines any claim she might make about acting in the community's best interest. I left Barbara's office feeling even more confident. Patricia had made a massive mistake, and it was going to cost her. Wednesday evening, I drove to the community center for the emergency HOA meeting. The parking lot was packed. Apparently word had spread about what Patricia had done, and people wanted to see what would happen. Our HOA had about 150 homes, and it looked like at least 70 or 80 residents had shown up. The community center meeting room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a table where the 5 board members sat. Patricia was in the center chair, looking defiant despite everything. The other 4 board members looked uncomfortable. I recognized them. Tom, the vice president who owned a landscaping company, Sarah, the secretary who was a stay-at-home mom, Michael, the treasurer who worked in banking, and Linda, a member-at-large who was a retired teacher. Robert Chen stood near the front, holding a stack of papers. He'd organized this meeting and had clearly come prepared. Patricia called the meeting to order, her voice sharp. This emergency meeting has been called to address what I consider to be baseless accusations about my conduct during last week's blizzard. I want to make clear that everything I did was in the best interests of this community and fully within my authority as HOA president. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw several people shaking their heads. Robert stood up. "Patricia, you broke into James Fitzgerald's garage and stole his property. That's not baseless accusation. That's fact. And you attempted to do the same thing at my house and at least 3 others that we know of." "I did not steal anything," Patricia said, her face reddening. "I redistributed excess emergency supplies in accordance with the HOA's emergency management protocols." "What protocols?" Sarah, the secretary, asked. "I've been secretary for 4 years, and I've never seen any such protocols." "They're implied in our duty to serve the community," Patricia shot back. "That's not how law works," Michael, the treasurer, said quietly. "You can't just make up policies and use them to take people's property." "I was helping people who needed help." James had more ice melt than he could possibly use. Other residents had none. I made a practical decision in an emergency situation. I stood up. Patricia, you broke into my garage. You didn't ask permission. You didn't try to buy ice melt from me. You didn't try to organize a community supply share. You broke in, took my property without permission, and distributed it while lying about where it came from. You told people it was from HOA emergency supplies. That's theft and fraud. You're being dramatic over a few bags of ice melt. It's the principle. You committed a crime. You used your position as HOA president to justify breaking into my home and stealing from me, and now you're sitting there acting like you did nothing wrong. Patricia stood up, slamming her hands on the table. I don't have to listen to this. I have served this community for 7 years. I've kept property values high. I've maintained standards. And this is the thanks I get. Being accused of being a criminal because I helped people during a blizzard. You didn't help people, Robert said. You stole from one person to give to others, then lied about it. That's not help. That's crime. Motion to remove Patricia Whitmore as HOA president, Tom, the vice president, said suddenly. Her actions during the blizzard violated basic legal and ethical standards. She's exposed the HOA to potential liability and she's lost the trust of the community. I second the motion, Sarah said immediately. Patricia looked stunned. You can't be serious. Tom, I appointed you as vice president. And now I'm doing what's right for the community. We need a vote. The vote was swift. Tom, Sarah, Michael, and Linda all voted to remove Patricia. Only Patricia herself voted against it. She was out. This is ridiculous, Patricia said, her voice breaking. You're all going to regret this. This community will fall apart without my leadership. The community will be fine, Linda said gently. But Patricia, what you did was wrong. You have to see that. I see a bunch of ungrateful people who don't appreciate everything I've done. James, I hope you're happy. You've destroyed me over some ice melt. You destroyed yourself, I said. I just held you accountable. Patricia grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting. The room erupted in conversation. Tom took over as acting president, and the meeting continued for another hour, discussing next steps and damage control. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to me to express support. Margaret, my elderly neighbor, gave me a hug. I never liked that woman, she said. Always telling me my flower boxes were the wrong color or my mailbox needed repainting. Good riddance. Donna, one of the people Patricia had delivered stolen ice melt to, apologized again. I still feel terrible about accepting it. Don't, I told her. You were lied to. You're a victim here too. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved forward on multiple fronts. The district attorney's office assigned a prosecutor to Patricia's case. Barbara filed my civil suit against her. The HOA board officially notified Patricia of her removal and demanded she return all HOA property and access codes. Patricia didn't go quietly. She hired a lawyer and tried to fight the removal, claiming the vote was invalid. Her lawyer also responded to my civil suit with a motion to dismiss, arguing that the value of the property was too small to warrant legal action. That won't work, Barbara told me when I asked about it. This isn't just about the value of the ice melt. It's about the breaking and entering, the abuse of position, and the principle of the matter. Judges don't like it when people use positions of authority to commit crimes. In early February, Patricia's lawyer contacted Barbara with a settlement offer. Patricia would pay me $500, admit no wrongdoing, and I would drop the civil suit and ask the DA to drop the criminal charges. What do you think? I asked Barbara. It's your decision, but honestly, I think we can get more if we go to trial, and the criminal charges aren't yours to drop. That's the state's decision now. I want to go to trial. I want a public record of what she did. Then that's what we'll do. The criminal case moved faster than the civil one. In late February, Patricia was formally charged with petty larceny and criminal trespass. The burglary charge was dropped because the DA didn't think they could prove intent for burglary, but the other charges stuck. Patricia pled not guilty, and a trial date was set for April. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Tom was officially elected as the new HOA president at a special election in March. His first acts were to review and clarify all HOA policies, establish clear limits on board authority, and set up a grievance process for residents who felt they'd been treated unfairly. No more arbitrary decisions, he announced at a meeting. Everything we do will be based on clearly written policies that everyone can access. And board members will never have access to individual properties without explicit permission, except in genuine emergencies where life or property is in immediate danger. The changes were overwhelmingly popular. Several people who'd been cited by Patricia for minor violations had their citations reviewed and dismissed. The HOA took on a much less adversarial tone. Patricia's house, meanwhile, sat with visible damage. The burst pipes had caused significant flooding in her basement, and apparently her insurance was fighting her on coverage because she'd failed to properly winterize her pipes. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was looking at about $15,000 in repairs. April came, and with it, Patricia's trial. It was held in Buffalo City Court, a relatively modest courtroom for what was technically a minor criminal case. But the courtroom was packed with people from the neighborhood who wanted to see justice done. The prosecutor, a young woman named Amanda Chen who was sharp and well-prepared, laid out the case methodically. She called me to the stand first. "Mr. Fitzgerald, please describe what happened on the evening of January 23rd, she said. I walked through the entire incident, from hearing the garage door open to finding Patricia loading my ice melt into a bin, to our confrontation and her admission that she was taking the ice melt to redistribute it. Did you give her permission to enter your garage? Amanda asked. Absolutely not. I didn't even know she had my garage code. How did she have the code? She claimed she had access codes to all properties for emergency HOA inspections. I later learned that's completely false and not authorized anywhere in our HOA documents. Patricia's lawyer, a middle-aged man named Richard Stone, tried to poke holes in my testimony during cross-examination. Mr. Fitzgerald, isn't it true that during a severe blizzard, people help each other out, share resources? Yes, when asked. Not when someone breaks into your house and steals from you, but you admit you had more ice melt than the average person. I had what I needed for my property. I'd prepared for the storm. That doesn't give anyone the right to steal from me. Did Miss Whitmore damage anything in your garage? No, but that's not the point. She entered without permission and took property that didn't belong to her. Amanda called the 3 residents Patricia had delivered ice melt to. All 3 testified that Patricia had told them the ice melt came from HOA emergency supplies, not from another resident. Donna was particularly effective, describing how betrayed she felt when she learned the truth. I would never have accepted it if I'd known it was stolen, Donna said, tears in her eyes. I'm not a thief, and Patricia made me feel like an accomplice to theft. Robert Chen testified about Patricia's attempt to take ice melt from his house and his refusal to let her in. When Patricia took the stand in her own defense, things got interesting. She maintained that she'd acted properly and in the community's best interest. I saw an emergency situation, she said. Some residents were well prepared, others weren't. As HOA president, I felt it was my responsibility to ensure everyone had what they needed. So you took it upon yourself to redistribute private property? Amanda asked during cross-examination. I redistributed excess supplies during an emergency. Without permission from the property owner, I felt the emergency circumstances justified my actions. Did you purchase ice melt to give to residents who needed it? Patricia hesitated. No, I didn't have time. But you had time to break into multiple garages and steal from your neighbors. I didn't break in. I had access codes. Access codes you weren't authorized to use for this purpose, correct? I was authorized to access properties for HOA inspections. During a blizzard, at 9 p.m. To take personal property. Patricia didn't have a good answer for that. Amanda then brought up Patricia's own burst pipes. Miss Whitmore, your pipes froze and burst during the same blizzard, correct? Yes. And you came to Mr. Fitzgerald asking for ice melt to help with your pipe emergency, correct? Yes, I asked for his help. After you'd stolen from him just 2 days earlier. I didn't steal. I've explained this. Did Mr. Fitzgerald help you? No, he refused. Did you find that refusal understandable, given that you'd broken into his garage and taken his property? Richard objected, but the judge allowed it. I thought neighbors were supposed to help each other, Patricia said bitterly. Even neighbors who steal from you, Amanda asked. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Patricia guilty on both counts, petty larceny and criminal trespass. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. In New York, petty larceny carried a maximum sentence of 1 year in jail and a fine. Criminal trespass was also a misdemeanor with similar potential penalties. At sentencing, the judge was clearly unimpressed with Patricia's lack of remorse. Miss Whitmore, you held a position of trust in your community, Judge Reynolds said. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and a stern expression. You used that position not to serve your neighbors, but to justify committing crimes against them. You broke into Mr. Fitzgerald's garage. You stole his property. You lied about where that property came from. And even now, you seem unable to accept that what you did was wrong. Patricia stood silently, her lawyer beside her. I'm sentencing you to 60 days in jail, suspended pending completion of 1 year of probation. You'll pay restitution to Mr. Fitzgerald in the amount of $300 to cover the value of the stolen property and his time and expenses. You'll complete 100 hours of community service. And you're to have no contact with Mr. Fitzgerald or any other residents of Meadowbrook Heights except as necessary for normal neighborhood interactions. Patricia's face crumpled. Your Honor, please. I've lost my position, my reputation, everything. Isn't that punishment enough? No, miss. Whitmore, it isn't. You committed crimes. There are consequences. If you violate any terms of your probation, you'll serve the full 60 days. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, she whispered. The civil trial was scheduled for June. Patricia's lawyer reached out to Barbara again with a new settlement offer. $2,000 and a written apology. It's getting better, Barbara said, but I think we can do even better at trial. Let's go to trial, I said. I want the full apology on record. I want everyone to know exactly what she did. The civil trial was shorter than the criminal one. Much of the same evidence was presented, but now we could also include the cost of my legal fees, my time, and the emotional distress caused by the theft and violation of my home. The jury in the civil case awarded me $5,000 in damages, plus legal fees. They also required Patricia to issue a written apology to be posted in the neighborhood newsletter and at the community center. The apology was brief and clearly written by her lawyer, but it was public. I, Patricia Whitmore, apologized to James Fitzgerald for entering his garage without permission and taking his property during the January 2026 blizzard. My actions were wrong and illegal. I apologized to the residents of Meadowbrook Heights for abusing my position as HOA president and for lying about the source of supplies I distributed. I take full responsibility for my actions. It was posted at the community center in early July. I stopped by to read it, and several neighbors were there doing the same. "Never thought I'd see the day Patricia Whitmore apologized for anything," Margaret said, reading over my shoulder. "Sometimes people need to learn the hard way," I replied. Life in Meadowbrook Heights gradually returned to normal. Patricia sold her house in August and moved out of the neighborhood. I heard she'd taken a job in Rochester and wanted to start fresh somewhere nobody knew about her crimes. Tom proved to be an excellent HOA president. Under his leadership, the neighborhood association became what it was supposed to be: a group of neighbors working together to maintain property values and community standards, not a dictatorship run by one power-hungry person. The garage code issue was addressed. All homeowners were required to change their codes, and it was made explicitly clear that HOA board members had no right to access them, except in genuine emergencies with proper documentation. I never did get my full ice melt back, but the restitution money more than covered it. More importantly, I'd stood up to someone who thought their position gave them the right to break the law. Patricia had learned an expensive lesson about the limits of HOA authority. One cold evening in December, almost a year after the blizzard, I was sitting in my living room with Copper curled up beside me. Snow was falling gently outside, nothing like the historic storm from the previous January, just a pleasant winter snowfall. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "HOA meeting next week. Tom wants to discuss snow removal policy. Should be drama-free for once." I smiled and texted back, "Looking forward to a boring meeting. Who would have thought we'd ever want boring HOA meetings?" Robert replied. "Character growth," I typed, "for the whole neighborhood." I looked out at the snow falling peacefully on my street. My garage was secure. My ice melt supply was adequate for whatever winter brought. And I lived in a neighborhood where the HOA actually served its residents instead of terrorizing them. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it takes going through the legal system, standing your ground, and refusing to let someone get away with wrongdoing just because they hold a position of authority. But in the end, it was worth it. Patricia Whitmore had stolen my ice melt during a blizzard and ended up losing everything: her position, her reputation, her home, and her freedom for a time. She'd cried when her pipes froze that same night, and she'd cried harder as the consequences of her actions kept mounting. As for me, I'd learned valuable lessons too. I learned that HOA authority has clear legal limits. I learned that standing up to bullies, even ones in positions of power, is necessary. I learned that communities can heal and change when people hold leaders accountable. The next morning, I woke to 6 inches of fresh snow. I got dressed, fired up my snow blower, and cleared my driveway. Then I cleared Margaret's driveway, and then I cleared the driveway of a new family that had just moved in down the street. When I finished, the new neighbor, a young woman named Christina, came out with a thermos of hot coffee. "Thank you so much," she said. "We just moved here last month and I wasn't sure how we'd handle the snow removal." "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "We help each other out here." "I heard there was some drama with the old HOA president. That's all in the past. The new president is great. You'll like it here," she smiled. "I already do. Everyone's been so welcoming." I walked back to my house, enjoying the crisp morning air and the satisfaction of a job well done. My street looked beautiful, covered in fresh snow, with cleared driveways and warm lights glowing in windows. This was what a neighborhood should be. People helping each other because they wanted to, not because someone with a title demanded it. People respecting each other's property and boundaries. People holding each other accountable when someone crossed the line. Patricia Whitmore had tried to rule through fear and arbitrary authority. She'd ended up losing everything. Meanwhile, the neighborhood she'd tried to control with an iron fist was thriving without her, stronger and more united than it had been in years. I went inside, hung up my coat, and made breakfast. Copper wagged his tail hopefully, and I gave him a treat. The news was predicting more snow next week, but I was ready. I had ice melt, a working generator, plenty of supplies, and most importantly, a secure garage with a code that only I knew. The blizzard of January 2026 would go down in Buffalo history as one of the worst storms on record. For me, it would always be remembered as the time an HOA Karen stole my ice melt and learned that actions have consequences. She'd cried when her pipes froze that same night, but she'd cried even harder when she realized that being HOA president didn't put her above the law. Justice had been served, my neighborhood was better for it, and life went on. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. Sometimes standing up for what's right, even over something as seemingly small as stolen ice melt, makes all the difference. Not just for you, but for everyone around you who's been waiting for someone to finally say enough is enough. As I settled into my chair with my coffee, Copper at my feet and snow falling peacefully outside, I felt content. The long legal battle was over. Patricia was gone. The neighborhood had healed. And I'd learned that sometimes the biggest victories come from refusing to let small injustices slide. The story of the HOA Karen who stole my ice melt and faced the consequences would be told in Meadowbrook Heights for years to come. Not as a tale of revenge, but as a reminder that community leadership requires integrity, that power comes with responsibility, and that even in the middle of a historic blizzard, you don't get to break into someone's garage and steal their property just because you think you know better than everyone else. Patricia Whitmore had learned that lesson the hard way. The rest of us just had to watch and remember. And every time it snowed, every time I spread ice melt on my driveway, I was reminded of that lesson. Authority without accountability is tyranny. But a community willing to stand up and demand accountability can change everything. That was worth fighting for. That was worth the months of legal battles, the stress, and the confrontation. Because now, every resident of Meadowbrook Heights knew their rights. They knew the limits of HOA authority, and they knew that if someone crossed the line, there would be consequences. Tom organized a neighborhood winter festival in mid-December, the first one the HOA had sponsored in years. There were ice sculptures, hot chocolate, a bonfire, and kids sledding on the hill behind the community center. The whole neighborhood came out, bundled in winter coats and scarves, laughing and enjoying the season together. Standing there watching families play in the snow, neighbors chatting and sharing stories, kids building snowmen, I realized this was what Patricia had never understood. A neighborhood isn't about rigid rules and citations and enforcing your will on others. It's about people coming together, supporting each other, and building something better than any individual could create alone. She'd had the power to create this kind of community spirit. Instead, she'd chosen to rule through fear and intimidation. She'd chosen to steal rather than ask. She'd chosen to lie rather than be honest. And she'd paid the price for those choices. As the sun set on the winter festival, painting the snow orange and pink, I helped Tom and the other volunteers clean up. We packed away the supplies, extinguished the bonfire safely, and made sure the community center was locked up. Great event, I told Tom. Thanks for helping organize it. You know, I was thinking, we should make this an annual thing, really bring the neighborhood together. I think that's a perfect idea. We've come a long way from last January, he said thoughtfully. We really have. You standing up to Patricia, that changed things. A lot of people wanted to, but nobody had the guts. You showed us it could be done. I just did what needed to be done. Anyone would have. No, not anyone. You put yourself out there. You dealt with the stress of pressing charges and going through trials. That took courage. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise but understanding his point. The neighborhood's better now, that's what matters. We walked to our cars together, our boots crunching in the snow. The streetlights came on, casting pools of warm light across the white landscape. Christmas decorations glowed in windows. A few neighbors were still outside, talking and laughing. This was home. Not because of the houses or the well-maintained lawns or the strict adherence to arbitrary rules, but because of the people, the community, the sense that we looked out for each other in real, meaningful ways. I drove home, parked in my cleared driveway, and went inside. The house was warm and welcoming. Copper greeted me enthusiastically, and I spent a few minutes playing with him before settling in for the evening. My phone buzzed. A text from the new neighborhood group chat Tom had set up. Great festival today. Thanks to everyone who made it happen. Best neighborhood event in years. Can't wait for next year. The messages kept coming, full of gratitude and community spirit. This was what happened when people felt safe, respected, and valued. This was what happened when leadership served instead of dominated. I thought about Patricia, wherever she was now. I hoped she'd learned from what happened. I hoped she understood why what she'd done was wrong. I hoped her next HOA, if she ever joined one, would benefit from a wiser, humbler version of her. But mostly, I just felt grateful. Grateful that I'd stood up for myself. Grateful that the legal system had worked. Grateful that my neighbors had supported me. Grateful that the neighborhood had come together and decided to be better. The blizzard of January 2026 had tested us all. Some people, like Patricia, had failed that test spectacularly. But the community as a whole had passed. We'd confronted wrongdoing, demanded accountability, and built something better from the ashes of a petty dictatorship. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed that night, snow still falling softly outside, I felt at peace. The battle was over. Justice had been served. Life had moved on. And Meadowbrook Heights was finally the kind of neighborhood it was always meant to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new snow to clear, new tasks to complete. But I'd face them with confidence, knowing I lived in a place where people stood up for what was right, where authority had limits, and where even HOA Karens who stole ice melt during blizzards would be held accountable. That was the real victory, not the court judgments or the restitution or even Patricia's removal from office. The real victory was the neighborhood we'd become in the aftermath, stronger and more united, because we'd faced a challenge together and refused to let injustice stand. I fell asleep that night with snow falling outside my window, Copper snoring softly in his bed, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes standing up to a bully over something as simple as stolen ice melt could change everything.